Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. If we want to truly understand modern Morocco, we have to look past the surface. It's an absolutely fascinating intersection to explore. You have these deep, ancient, indigenous roots colliding head-on with the relentless ambition of a really powerful royal lineage. So let's dive right in and see exactly how this nation was forged.
Right off the bat, think about the sheer scale of time we're dealing with here. We are contrasting a massive 20,000-year history of the indigenous Berber people who've been living in North and Sub-Saharan Africa literally since antiquity, with the relatively young 4th-century reign of the Alawi family. It's an incredible dynamic. You have this deeply rooted civilization coexisting with a royal house that honestly didn't even take the throne until the 17th century.
Now, what's really fascinating is how these ancient roots actually form the very identity of the nation today. The indigenous people call themselves the Amazigh, which translates beautifully to free men. And the name of the country itself, it actually comes from the Berber word Amaruk, meaning land of God. So this plurimillenarian Amazigh culture isn't just some relic of the past. It's entirely woven into the fabric, the language, and the geography of the entire Maghreb.
But of course, the Amazigh people didn't exist in a vacuum. North Africa was basically a historic magnet for successive foreign powers. We're talking about the Phoenicians and Carthaginians setting up ancient trading posts, the Romans rolling in and calling the region Mauritania or Numidia, all the way through the Arab conquests around 700 AD and eventually modern European settlers. The Amazigh endured through all of them. Amidst all this shifting power, a new family enters the picture, the Alawis. The key word to remember here is Sharifian. This means they claim direct descent from the Islamic prophet Muhammad, specifically through his grandson Hassan ibn Ali. Now, this isn't just a fun piece of family trivia. Back in the 17th century, Moroccan communities viewed this Sharifian status as the ultimate qualification to lead. It gave them absolutely crucial religious and political legitimacy. And that divine mandate brings us to the dynasty's dramatic motto: if you support God, he will support you. This wasn't just a catchy slogan, it was literally the ideological fuel for their pursuit of absolute authority. The Alawis had originally migrated from the Hijaz and Arabia to the Tafalat oasis in eastern Morocco, and this motto perfectly captures the absolute conviction they carried as they transformed from local religious figures into fierce unifiers of a totally fractured land.
Okay, so let's break down this step-by-step rise to power. The ruling Saadian dynasty was collapsing, and local factions like the Dalaiya Federation were battling it out for control. Step 1. The Alawi family, hanging out in the Tafalat oasis, steps up to the plate. Step 2. In 1631, the locals choose Malai al-Sharif as their leader and sultan. And Step 3. After a bunch of intense sibling rivalries and tribal battles, his son al-Rashid brilliantly manages to conquer Fez, Marrakesh, and basically reunite almost all of Morocco by 1672. Which brings us to a frankly staggering number: 55 years. That is how long Sultan Malai Ismail, al-Rashid's younger half-brother, ruled the country. It marks one of the longest and most undeniably pivotal eras in all of Moroccan history. If you take away just one thing from this explainer about how the modern Moroccan state was centralized, just know that it happened during these exact 55 years.
So, the big question is, how on earth did Ismail maintain control for over half a century? Well, his methods were highly effective, though historically noted for being incredibly brutal. He created a massive standing army made up of slaves known as the Black Guard, who were completely loyal to him alone. He moved the capital to a giant brand-new fortified palace city in Meknes. He ransomed Christian captives to fund his endless wars, and he definitively blocked the Ottomans from gaining any influence. He essentially centralized power with an absolute iron grip.
But, dynasties evolve. If we jump ahead a bit to his grandson, Muhammad III, you see a completely stark contrast in leadership. After a long period of tremendous turmoil following Ismail's death, Muhammad III stepped in and re-established order with a totally different playbook. He actually decentralized power. He lowered taxes. He founded the port city of Essaouira specifically to funnel European trade. And fascinatingly enough, he became the very first head of state to officially recognize the newly formed United States in 1787. Talk about a pivot.
But this whole period of open diplomatic engagement eventually gives way to a much darker chapter for the monarchy. It really begs the question: how does a centuries-old dynasty, deeply rooted in religious tradition and absolute power, manage to survive the absolute steamroller that was 19th and 20th century European imperialism? The reality? Well, they barely did.
Morocco faced just relentless European encroachment. In 1844, the French totally routed the Moroccan army at the Battle of Isly. Then, in 1860, the Hispano-Moroccan War saddled the country with a massive, crushing debt to Spain. Finally, facing internal rebellion and huge external pressure, Sultan Abd al-Hafid abdicated after signing the Treaty of Fez in 1912, and that officially initiated French and Spanish colonial rule. This kicks off what's known as the era of the puppet sultans. Under the French and Spanish protectorates, the Alawis sultans weren't removed entirely. Instead, they were kept around to basically provide the illusion of indirect rule. The colonial administrators kept them on as symbolic figureheads. So for decades, it seemed like this once mighty dynasty was reduced to just collaborating with their colonizers merely to survive.
But history is full of surprises, right? In 1927, the French made a massive calculation based on the number 18. That was the age of Mohammed V when he was acclaimed as the new sultan. He'd grown up in pretty strict isolation inside the royal palace. The colonial regime assumed this young, sheltered kid would be compliant and easily controlled. Spoiler alert, they were very, very wrong.
Instead of playing the puppet, Mohammed V became this incredibly powerful symbol for the Moroccan nationalist movement. During the famous 1947 Tangier speech, he openly expressed support for Arab nationalism and pointedly left out the usual mandated praise for the French protectorate. When the French demanded he abdicate in 1953, he flatly refused. He was forced into exile in Madagascar at gunpoint. But honestly, that just poured gasoline on the fire, sparking violent uprisings back home and forcing the French to the negotiating table. In 1955, Mohammed V made a triumphant return, ultimately securing Morocco's full independence. And this brilliantly illustrates how the monarchy adapted to a brand new era. In 1957, Mohammed V made a highly deliberate title shift. He dropped the title of Sultan, which conveyed traditional religious authority, and officially adopted the title of King. This was a clear-cut signal to the global community of a modernized Moroccan state, aligning the country with the framework of a modern, constitutional head of state. Since gaining independence, the Alawi dynasty has seen a pretty rapid modern succession. Mohammed V led the newly independent nation until his passing in 1961. He was then succeeded by his son, Hassan II, who ruled right through the rest of the 20th century. That brings us to 1999, when the current monarch, King Mohammed VI, took the throne. Now, the reign of Hassan II was highly complex. While he did promulgate a new constitution in 1962, his rule relied heavily on strong executive power. The period from 1975 to 1990 is widely documented by historians as the Years of Lead, marked by significant state repression and the jailing of political dissenters. Concurrently, though, Hassan II galvanized massive nationalist sentiment, most notably organizing the 1975 Green March to press Morocco's claims over the Western Sahara territory, which is a conflict that remains unresolved today. Bringing us up to the present era under King Mohammed VI. His reign kicked off in 1999 with widespread promises of further liberalization. In 2011, amid the regional Arab Spring protests, he actually passed new constitutional reforms via a national referendum. However, political analysts and scholars note that while Morocco is officially a parliamentary constitutional monarchy on paper, the crown still retains significant authoritarian control and holds the effective power over the state.
Which brings us to our final thought for today. When you step back and look at the friction between a 20,000-year-old Amazigh heritage, the 400-year survival of a royal dynasty, and the pressing demands of the 21st century, how exactly do ancient traditions and absolute monarchies fit into an increasingly democratic modern world? It's a huge question, and one that Morocco continues to answer every single day. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helped make this incredibly rich history a little clearer. See you next time.